What's going on, everybody? In this video, I'm going to give a quick overview of how to use the ACES system that comes with the BattleTech ACES Scouring Sands box. So what I've done here is I just set up a real basic, well, actually, this is the setup for scenario 2 that's in the campaign book, at least the terrain setup. And I'm just going to go through kind of a pretend round where we have these 6, we'll call these the player forces over here, 6 units. And then we have 3 enemy units, or we'll call them the automa units over here on the right. And I'll actually move this a little bit here so you can see there's another one right here. And we'll just kind of, I got to get rid of that. And so we'll pretend that we have basically a 1 round of play done. And we're going to go into round 2. And we're going to say that the automa has 1 initiative. So basically that means the player is going to move 2 units and then the automa is going to move 1. So we've already figured initiative out, so we're ready to go there. Now, we're in the initiative phase. So what happens is the first step is we take the 3 cards here and for the automa, and we're going to scooch them down. Now, obviously, I wouldn't have them sitting on the playing surface like this, but just for demo purposes, I'm going to keep them front and center so we can see what's going on. So you're actually going to scooch them all down just a tad so we can see their number. And this is going to identify their initiative order. So essentially this means that the Timberwolf is going to move first in order, at least as of right now. The Warhawk is going to move second, and the Shadowcat's going to move third. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we look at our commander card. And if there's any orders here, we double check those before we get too far into the turn. And it says during the initiative phase, which we're in right now, assign the move last token to your unit with the highest medium damage. And if they're tied, then go to the highest point value. So these tokens right here tell us one has a move first. It's all zeros. So it's gonna force them to go first unless there's any units in force withdrawal that have a lower number. And then there is a move last token. Sometimes it'll tell you to put the move last token on. So in this case, I'm gonna look for the unit that does the highest medium damage. And we have 2. So the Warhawk and the Mad Cat, or Timberwolf, both do 5 medium damage. So next it tells us to look at the highest point value, which is going to be the Timberwolf. So we're going to put that token on there. So the Timberwolf is going to, I'm sorry, I'm doing this the wrong way, excuse me. Sorry, it's the move last token. I was going to say, that doesn't make sense. That's because it's a move last token. Okay, so the Timberwolf's going to go last during the movement phase. So I'm going to go ahead and move as the player and move 2 units. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do movement for now the Warhawk, who has the lowest number. Okay, so I went ahead and moved 2 player units. And those are going to be the Victor that I have up here and the Manticore. Now, the Manticore is a tracked combat vehicle, so it's allowed to enter woods. There are some vehicles that cannot. But the Manticore is tracked, so it can move into the woods. And it uses the same, basically they have the same movement as mechs for the most part. Their movement is halved in woods. Now, if you're not totally familiar with Alpha Strike, this is called a woods template. So even though like my Victor doesn't really have a tree right in front of it, it's inside of this triangle, so it's in the woods when you're evaluating shooting. So what they try to do is, the Victor is trying to is more of an urban combat, so it's kind of trying to get out of the line of sight here. Now, it's not going to be able to totally do that, but it's at least trying to get closer to these buildings where it can really do some damage. And the Manticore tried to do the same thing because it's just, they're not going to stand up to the Warhawk too well. But they couldn't completely get out of the way, so that's where they decided to move now. Okay, so the Warhawk is going to go. And so once we're ready to move, we're going to take the card down to reveal the entire Aces card. And I'll bring this up so you can read it. But we're going to go through the 3 possibilities as far as how they're going to behave. So we start on the left, and we're going to check if it's going to do aggressive behavior. So it's checking so it wants both of these bullet points to be true. So it's looking for an enemy that has moved, that's the green check mark, and is within 24 inches. So we definitely have that. Both of these units I just moved are going to be within 24 inches and are in your current line of sight, being able to attack. That target means you can actually attack them. So they're within range for you to attack. Now, for that, I'd have to look behind the Warhawk, but I don't think either of them could be seen right now. Okay, I literally went over the shoulder of the Warhawk, and no, the building's in the way of both of those units, which is exactly what the player wanted. So this would not be true. So because it doesn't have them actually in its current targeting, in its line of sight where it can actually shoot at them. So we're going to move over to balanced. If there are any enemies within 24 inches, which there are two, potentially all of them are, but at least those two are definitely within 24 inches. So that means we're going to go with the balanced approach. So what it's going to do now is try to figure out the top part of this white box. There's a small line here that divides them, but the top part is going to have it key on a specific target within sometimes within a range, sometimes it'll just tell you any. And then it's also going to have us look at an ideal target. So we're going to try to look at targets that are at least in our range. Then it's going to try to find one that's more ideal if there's multiple. So let's check that now. So it's looking for a target within 18 inches, and then it will go out to 24. So let's see if we can determine this. So if I'm pulling out the tape measure on the Victor, that is within 18 inches. So we're good there. The Manticore is also within 18 inches. So it has two options right now. So what we're going to do then is say, okay, this is true, and both are within 18, and there are two of them. So we have to come down here. So we want to get one in our targeting. Okay, so I double checked this in the rules. It's good that I already need a rules check, but if you look on the back of the manual, it says this icon means in attack range. A target the unit can see at a range where it has a non-zero damage rating. However, that doesn't answer my question, which is, does it mean right now? Which it doesn't. It can't see either of those. Or does that mean when it's done moving? Like it can get to a line of sight where it can attack. Okay, well, if you open up the rule book and you go to this example, it specifically says the column includes these two icons. That means this icon means the Phoenix Hawk in this example only considers targets that it can attack after moving. Okay, so that answers the question. So if we go back to our card, this evaluates as yes, it can attack either of those targets when it's done moving. So now we're going to switch over to the yellow and figure out, okay, which of these are we actually going to target? So we pull up our commander card and we're going to go through the yellow. We don't have a destroy objective in this mission. We're going to look at armor lost. Neither have any. The lowest TMM, they both have a 1. And so this is what brings up my the dice system I'm using, which it recommends, where you put a dice that matches the color of the type of movement they used and also their TMM number that's showing on the face. And it's really important to do this. In the Alpha Strike box, it just gives you tokens to say whether they use ground movement or jumping. But it's really important to use the dice, I think, here, because it's constantly asking you to look at their TMM. So unless you want to keep looking at cards all the time, use the dice. It'll just make your life easier. They both have a 1, so we're going to skip down to most medium damage. Now, the Manticore does 3 at medium range, and the Victor does 4. So it's going to try to target on the Victor. That's going to be the target it's keying on. So it's going to be looking at the Victor right now. Okay, so we know what our target is. So it's going to use ground movement, and it's going to try to occupy woods or depth 1 water. The Warhawk does not have any woods nearby, and there's no water on this map, so that's not going to work. All the woods are too far away, so we're going to skip that one. It's going to look for cover from as many enemies as possible. Now, it's going to try to get that target because the next, obviously, there's a lot of places where it could do that. Of course, it could just hide. It could bring itself up here and just try to hide for the rest of the round. So there's definitely plenty of places where it can get cover versus as many enemies as it can. But it's also going to, so then the next filter is going to be, it's going to try to get closer to the target. So that's going to make this a little more interesting, is how do we get it closer to this target, but also block line or give it cover at least. I guess it's saying cover, not necessarily blocking line of sight, but how do we give it cover against as many enemies as possible? So when I'm looking at this, it's, what immediately comes to my mind is, can I get it somewhere over here by this building? Because I would block myself from these other targets over here and probably keep myself only in line of sight to that Victor. So that immediately pops out to me as a place where this Warhawk could go to satisfy that requirement. I'm getting closer to the Victor, but I'm also providing cover. So I'm going to measure this out because the Warhawk is pretty darn slow, and it can only, so here's the Warhawk, it can only move 8 inches, but I think that might be just enough to make this work. So I'm going to measure out 8 inches, and that's going to go from the base. And yes, that's going to allow me to get right up against that wall of the building. And that would block line of sight to pretty much everything except the Victor. So to me, that's going to be the absolute perfect place for that Warhawk to go. And if I were playing, honestly, that's where I would probably go to. Now, there are other units that can move, but they're never going to be able to get close enough to do anything to that Warhawk. So from there, if I measure that one more time, I think I can actually get immediately up against the wall, yes. So that's going to be an easy one. And I'm going to move right here and position it so that Warhawk can see. And I'm going to just kind of duck down here. And that Warhawk can see the victor. And that Manticore cannot see the Warhawk. Or at least can't see enough of it for it to actually attack. So that'll be our first move. So it's going to move there, which I think is actually a really smart play because it's going to have open fire against that victor. And really nothing else is going to be able to get there. Maybe the crab will be able to get there, but that's about it. So I think we satisfy the requirements very well. So once we're done with that card, we flip it over to the combat side, and then we will wait until it's time for combat. So now I'm going to move 2 more units as the player, and then I'll come back and do the next unit, which will be the Shadow Cat. All right, so I moved the Crab and the LRM Carrier for the player. I also moved the Warhawk back a little bit because I realized the card said it actually needed cover, not blocking line of sight necessarily. And so by moving it back a little here, I measured it was the same. It still allowed it to get here, but now that victor is going to have this building in the way for partial cover. So that better satisfies the requirement there. I also marked it with a 1 for its, I think you can see that, yeah, the TMM for a 1. So the LRM Carrier moved up just a little bit to stay as deep in these woods as it can. So it has a 1 TMM, and then the Crab just kind of made a beeline for here because it can block from the Masakari. That Shadowhawk might key on it because it's out in the open, and I'm not necessarily saying I would do that in reality as a player. I'm not sure I'd leave my my Crab way out in the open, especially with 2 units. There's Timberwolf here and the Shadow Cat both still to move, but you know, it's a demonstration. So we'll see. I'm curious to see what will happen as the automa starts to evaluate this. So we are going to do the Shadow Cat, so I'll move that card out of the way. Now the Shadow Cat's using the sniper persona, which kind of makes sense, even though it's actually called a striker on the out. So if you look at the Alpha Strike card, the role is a striker, but it's playing with the sniper role, which makes sense. It has a Gauss rifle. Okay, so we'll go through this again. So it's going to look for, are there any moved enemies enemies that have completed their movement within 18 inches and no enemies that have not completed their movement within 6. So I'm going to measure to that Crab. Okay, so yes, it's about 16 inches away. So it does meet that requirement, so that's going to make the aggressive behavior live. So let's see what it's going to do. So it's going to target any enemies within 10 inches, which it doesn't have any, and then any enemies within 18 inches. Now, it is fairly close to the victor as well. Oh boy, that's real close, but it's just outside of 18 inches. So it is going to key on the Crab. So it's going to be looking at the Crab. And of course, it's looking for a target it can shoot after it's done moving. And it's going to look for the yellow ideal target, but I think we've already identified it's going to be the Crab. That's going to be its ideal target. We can pull up the command card. It's going to look for, we know these 2 aren't going to have anything right now, lowest TMM, but we're within 18 inches here, so the Crab's really the only unit, so we don't go to another one because this one satisfied the range requirement. So if the victor was within 18 inches, it would target the victor because of that yellow ideal target requirement. Okay, so it's going to use ground movement, and that's important because the Shadow Cat. Sorry if I said Shadowhawk before. The Shadow Cat can use jumping movement, but it's going to use ground movement here. It's going to try to get in the fewest enemy targeting ranges. So this means not only are they in line of sight, but also can they target. So there's definitely a lot of places we could do that to try, just like the Warhawk did, to try to get in range only of the victor, or I'm sorry, only of the Crab. So I'm immediately thinking of this spot right where the Warhawk used to be, because it would only be in range of the Crab for right now. It might, these 2, maybe it could see, but probably not. Try to occupy woods, we can't, and cover versus as many enemies as possible. So similar to what we had just done for the Warhawk, I think based on what I can see of the map here, I'm thinking moving it up here is probably the way to go. It'll block it from these two. I don't think these two, I mean, the fire starter could maybe find it, but as of right now, it would be in as few enemy targeting ranges as possible. And I think the fire starter has no long range, so although it's probably medium range now, but I still think this is going to be the number one spot. I'm going to just check line of sight real quick, and then I'll just confirm that. All right, so I double checked it, and originally I was thinking here, where that Warhawk had been, would be a good place, because it would have partial cover to the crab, and it would really be out of line of sight of anything else. But then I looked at the card and I thought, it has 16-inch movement, and on the Aces card, it doesn't say anything about needing to get closer to the target. So then I thought, actually, back here would be better. So you can't see it, but it's, there it is. It's kind of hugging the building here. And I confirmed line of sight because of the angle. The crab actually has this building a bit in the way. So the Shadowcat was going to have partial cover. Sorry if I said Shadowhawk again. And this has a clear line of sight. Shadowcat has clear line of sight into the crab. So actually, that would be the best place for it to go. So again, the card doesn't say anything, and that makes sense for a sniper. The sniper isn't trying to get in a brawl here. So it really makes sense for that sniper to move back and get some cover and stay out of the line of sight of anything else. And this guarantees, because these three have moved, this guarantees nothing else is going to be going to have line of sight. So it gets to snipe at this one target that it wants. So that makes sense, and that actually is really smart. This building hugging thing is interesting to me. So I've found that almost every card I've evaluated so far, the automa hugs a building like this on the side. And of course, I play Classic most of the time, so there's no such thing in Classic BattleTech. So this is a new thing to me. But I've noticed that it does this pretty consistently. There we go. And I don't know if that's a thing for just human Alpha Strike players. Do you hug buildings a lot like this? Like hug the sides of them to get this little corner of the building in the way as partial cover? I mean, I would assume so. Seems like an efficient way to get some cover. So anyway, we'll flip that one over for combat. Cover that up. And then I'll go ahead and move the last two units. I don't think it's going to be anything terribly exciting. And then we'll come back and move the Timberwolf. All right, so the Firestarter made a daring move, and it jumped. It actually just enough jump movement to get in the corner of that building, which I thought was the perfect place for it. Because the Timberwolf hasn't moved, but the other two have. And this blocks line of sight to the Warhawk, and obviously the sniper back there can't see it. But that gives it a chance. If this Timberwolf wants to move up and try to attack it, it actually would get into short range with a high TMM and have a chance at short range combat, which is what the Firestarter wants to do. So I thought, let's go with that. And then the Zeus did the boring thing. Obviously, it's not really sure what this Timberwolf's going to do, but the best thing it can do is hide in the woods here and at least boost its TMM. So I'm very interested to see what the Timberwolf's going to do here. This version of the Timberwolf only does 5 damage at medium, but there is another one that this scenario, this training simulator wants you to use. It does 7 damage. So you might have to get a little more creative to stay the heck away from that thing. Okay, so let's see. So we can take this token off. We know that's actually, that's just for movement. So we can take that off. It's only movement, not combat. Okay, so Timberwolf has 10-inch ground movement. So let's see what it's going to do here. So we're going to look at aggressive movement. If this unit has more armor than the damage rating of any enemy, which I can almost guarantee it does. So the Timberwolf has 8 armor and nothing that we have has anything even close to that. So it's going to use aggressive movement. So it's going to look for a target within 10 inches. So I'm going to check if this Firestarter is within 10. It is just outside of 10. It's about 11 inches away. So it's just outside of that. Okay, so next it's going to go into 18 inches. And I think almost all of these will be. Obviously the Firestarter will be. The Zeus is in 18 and the LRM carrier is just outside. So we've got 2 units here. We've got the Firestarter and the Zeus. It's going to try to get targeting line of sight to a yellow target. So again, let's pull this up. And I think we can figure out what it's going to go for here. So it's going to look for TMM. Lowest TMM, which is going to be the Zeus. So that's the one it's going to key on. Okay, so it's going to actually try to get in targeting range of as many enemies as possible. Now that's easy. That basically means it can just move right out into this area because it'll have line of sight to everything. And it can move 10 inches, so I'm pretty sure it can get out there. It's gonna have to make a little bend around the building here. But yeah, it can get right out in the open here and it could see everything. So we have this general area that it can move into. Okay, next it's gonna try to get closer to the target. That would satisfy that. And again, lots of places for that. Cover versus as many enemies as possible. Okay, so that one's gonna really narrow things down. So to get cover, it's gonna have to use the buildings. It can't get to the woods. Although it technically has cover from these two. So what that means to me is we're gonna look for a place where, and I'm just gonna move these out of the way temporarily because we're talking about this area. And we're gonna be looking in around here. And that to me would say we're gonna try to keep ourselves out of line of sight of this fire starter because we can't get cover against it. As I'm thinking through this, I think you gotta go through the filters one at a time. So if I say targeting range of the most enemies, I mean, technically that's gonna mean this area because this gives me line of sight to everything. So I have to stick with that. So it's gotta be somewhere in this area. Then I'm moving closer to the target, which all of this does. And then I wanna get cover from as many enemies as I can. So I would say if it can get somewhere in this area, it might just clip enough to have cover from 4 enemies. Let me see if I can do that. So if I go back to 10, no, it cannot. It can only get to here, so it really can't get any coverage there. So that makes this a little tricky because if I just go ahead and plop this thing here, that to me doesn't feel like a very good move. But if I do our wonderful building hugging technique and go here, well, that would mean the fire starter can't get it. It's definitely blocked. I'm looking at it right now. It's definitely blocked. It would have line of sight to I think to 3 things. No, it can't see the LRM, or I'm sorry, the mana core. But it would have line of sight to 3 things, and it would have cover from these 2 because it's getting the cover from these trees. And it would not quite have cover from the crab, but if it moved here, that would give it probably just enough, maybe, to hide from that crab. So these are the ones that for me, as I'm working through this, I'm struggling a little bit as to what would be the best move. So according to the rules, the golden rule is keep the game moving. So just get a move on and do what you think would be best. Now, to me, I understand it wants to be in line of sight to a lot of enemies. However, oh, you know what? I think I'm not considering actually over here. I think I may have found the spot. It actually might move here. That might be its ideal spot because it would, if I peek it out enough, it can see everything. And it technically doesn't, well, it does not have cover from the Zeus, but it has cover from everything else because they're gonna have to, this is gonna have to shoot through woods. I think actually, there you go. I think I found its ideal location. It has line of sight. The fire starter's iffy, but it basically has line of sight to everything. It's moved closer to its primary target, and it has cover from almost everything except for the Zeus. Okay, there we go. So just when I was thinking I'm struggling, I found it. But anyway, the rules do tell you just keep the game moving and do what you think would be the best. So if it were up to me and I didn't see this at the last second, I probably would have put it somewhere around here, or maybe even here. Because that, I feel like that would be the smart move. Definitely keep it in line of sight of this target, but you know, don't put yourself just out in the open like a goofball. You know, you definitely want to protect yourself. Okay, so now that we've got that done, I'll go ahead and put these things back here, and we're going to go into combat. So we're just going to pretend that the player has gone ahead and done their combat because it doesn't really matter. It's not totally relevant to this. I'm going to flip this over to combat, and then we're going to proceed with our combat phase. And I'll just kind of show you how the automa does this. It's not really that different than what would be normal. Like it's just going to, it may change the target. That's the only thing that really would change here in the combat phase. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. So when we look at the combat, so we're going to start, actually, the Timberwolf's going to go first here for combat. because the tokens that I had, they don't apply when it comes to combat. So it's going to go for the unit with the least armor. So see, it's looking for units within 24 inches, which is going to be most of the map here. I think the Victor might be outside of that. Yeah, like the Manticore, I think, is in, but the Victor is just out. So it pretty much has access to anything here. I'd have to check on the Firestarter, but it's definitely not going to, I don't think it's going to fight the Firestarter. Actually, maybe it will, because it's looking for lowest armor. Yeah, I think it actually might. But you'll see that this changes. So it was keying on the Zeus for movement, but now that it's here and it has line of sight, it's actually going to look at something different, which is the least amount of armor. And I think, yeah, the Firestarter only has 3. The LRM carrier, though, only has 2. And the LRM carrier is in its line of sight. So it will actually do that and stop. Now, if multiple had the same amount of armor, and this is armor that it has left. So right now I'm just pretending they all have fresh sheets of armor. But if there were, you know, like let's say the Firestarter had one pip away and they both had 2 armor left, it would have 2 units it could fire at, and it would go down to the red command list. And the red command list would tell us least armor, which we already tried, lowest TMM, and it would key. Well, it would again key on the LRM carrier there. Okay, so it's actually going to make its targeting or its roll against the against the LRM carrier based on the current armor. That's not good for the LRM carrier. So now the way that the game wants you to play is it's going to want you to use multiple attack rolls, which I use anyway. I would never play Alpha Strike without multiple attack rolls. I don't know. It just doesn't do anything for me as a single all or nothing attack. You know, either. So basically, what this would mean for this particular unit is either the Timberwolf destroys it or does absolutely nothing, and that to me is like not really very fun. But I get it. It's simple, and it is called Alpha Strike, so you hit or you don't. But in this game, you're going to do individual attack rolls. Now, you could just go like this, like this, like this. You could get multiple sets of dice, which I think is a fine way to do it, and probably what I'm going to do here on camera. Or you can do the piloting system, the pilot die system, which I know is very controversial. Everybody has their opinion on it. But when you do that, you basically take 1 big dice, 3 little dice, and this is popularized by Death from Above Warm Gaming because they do this. But basically, you're going to take whatever the big dice rolls. So if it rolled a 5 and these rolled like this, you would basically say you have a 10, a 10, a 9, and 2 8s. Those would be your rolls. And then you see, you know, however many of these beat the target number, that's how many damage it does. For this, though, just to prevent any controversy, I don't want anybody to get mad, I'm just going to use 5 different dice, 5 different color pairs, and I'm going to roll them all at the same time. So then we're going to figure out the targeting number, and this is all completely normal. There's nothing new about this. So this now in the game, all the clan, at least at the beginning, they have skill 2. So this has a 2 for its skill. It doesn't get any modifier for its attack because it just used ground movement. The Zeus has a 1, so that now we're up to 3. It does have cover from the woods, so that's a 4, and it has medium range. I'm assuming that's medium range. It's not within 6 inches, yeah. So that's medium range, so that's going to be a 6. So when we have a target number, we then refer to this card one more time, and we're going to look at its overheat instructions. So this tells me if the TN is 5 or less, it's not. If the TN is 7 or less and overheating might let the unit hit the target structure, use up to 2 overheat. Now, the Timberwolf only has 1 overheat. And if it used it at medium range, sorry, there you go. It only has an overheat of 1. And if it used it, it would have a medium damage of 6. Now the Zeus has 7 points of armor. So in this case, it cannot hit structure. It will not use this. Okay, I'll leave that there. So this is it's gonna need 6s. So I would just take my 5 pairs of dice, I'll roll them all, and then we'll see how many are 6s. Okay, so actually, surprisingly, it missed 2 times. So these 2 missed, so it would do 3 damage total, and I would take my LRM carrier out, and I would mark it with 2 armor and 1 structure. And that would mean for a ground vehicle, we would make a roll on the motive table, which conveniently is right here on the quick reference. We would roll on the motive table to see if there's any damage to its movement. or if it's completely immobilized. And then we would also do a roll on the vehicle critical hit table, which is new for this game. This is different from the standard one. I think there's a couple places where there's no critical hit, but this table does have a critical hit on everything, so it doesn't matter what it rolls. So let's just do an example here. So I'll use the pink dice. We'll say that's the one that got to the structure. So first I'm going to roll in the movement. Okay, I got a 9. So that's going to put me in the 9 to 10 bracket. That's going to be minus 2 inches to its move. So now it can only move 4, and it takes 1 away from its TMM. So now its TMM is 0. So that's going to be a permanent change to that LRM carrier. And usually, in my case, I mark those with purple dice as a movement loss, and I would just mark it as a 1 to its movement loss. And then I'm going to roll on the critical hit table, and I get an 8. So an 8 is going to be a weapon hit. So I'm going to reduce all the weapon damages on the LRM carrier by 1. So it's going to do 2 damage at every range. It also affects its indirect fire. So the indirect fire would become an IF2 as well. Now, I guess I take from this that Catalyst Game Labs feels that vehicles don't blow up fast enough. And so they said, you know what, let's make the critical hit hurt everything. And let's get these things blowing up a lot faster than they normally do. So I don't know. It seems to be that way with this and the Battlefield support. They seem to think that vehicles just need to get off the table ASAP. All right, so that's number 1. Okay, so the Timberwolf is done. And when you're done, you take the combat card, you put it at the bottom of the deck, you set the deck down, you put the card back on top. Don't read the movement card. Don't memorize it. And then when you get to that combat card being back up at the top again, you take all the cards, shuffle them, and put the movement side up. So that's just the way to recycle the card. Okay, let's go to the Juggernaut. So we got the Warhawk. Now the Warhawk, when we moved it, and I'm just going to kind of move this out of the way so you can see where it is. But the Warhawk is targeting that Victor, and it got itself in a position where that's the only unit it could see. So there we go. So the Warhawk's going to do 5 damage as well at medium range. Now, it has a much simpler set of instructions. It just wants a unit within 24 inches first, which it has, the Victor. And it also wants to find, once it finds that, it wants to make sure that it's the ideal yellow target. So we're going to skip the first 2. We don't have a destroy objective. We don't have any armor lost on this unit yet. And we're going to look for the lowest TMM, but we only have 1 unit. So anyway, I'm just showing you what you would think about, but of course we only have 1 target. So it's pretty straightforward. So then it's going to follow the exact same process, which is going to be calculate your target number. So it has a 2, a 3 for the Victor's TMM, 1 for cover in the woods, and then 2 for medium range. It also has 6s. It also does 5 damage. So I'll just go ahead and roll the exact same 5 dice. Oh, whoops. I almost forgot a step. Sorry. We got to look at the overheat instructions for the Juggernaut. Okay, and we have one here. So if the target number is 6 or less, and overheat might let it hit the target structure, use up to 1 overheat. This unit has no overheat, so we actually will ignore this, for this moment at least. In this situation, we're going to ignore it. It has no overheat. Okay. Wonder what the Victor's armor is. It's actually 7. So anyway, wouldn't have been able to get in the structure. Okay, so let's just roll the 5. Let's see how many 6s we get. Wow. I'm rolling horribly. I hope I roll this bad. This was a 3 or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, it only got 2. I hope I roll this badly for the automa when we play the campaign. So in this case, it would do 2 damage from these 2 rolls. So it would do 2 damage to the Victor. Okay? We'll move these out of the way. And we'll do the same thing. This one goes to the bottom. That goes back on top. And then we'll move on to the Shadow Cat, who did something very similar where it got into line of sight only to the crab. So again, we could go through this. It has the exact same rules as the Warhawk within 24 inches. And now let me just double check that it is in 24 inches. Again, let me move this out of the way over here so you can see the Shadow Cat. And it's actually outside of 24. Now, I've seen this question actually asked already, but somebody said, well, what if there is no target in 24? What are you supposed to do? And the answer is that's just the first range bracket. So it wants to find one within 24. That's its first step. But if it can't, then it just is going to go beyond that and just find a target at any range it can hit, which would be still the crab. And then we don't have to go to the yellow command list because we only have 1 target here. I've already confirmed that. And so it's going to try to target that crab. So it's going to have a different target number. It's going to have a 2 for its skill, a 2 for the TMM, so that's 4, and then The crab, I don't believe has any cover. No, it's out in the open. I confirmed that when I checked line of sight. And it's just going to have the long range modifier, so it's going to be an 8. So it needs to hit an 8. The Shadow Cat does 2 damage from long range, and the overheat instructions for this say that if it, so actually none would apply because it says TN5, TN7 or less, and then it asks for TN10 or more. Effectively, when it says TN10, it's going to try to cool down. So it's actually going to tell don't attack if you're already overheated. But we're at an 8, so it just, none of those apply. So it's just going to roll 2. I'll do that. You know, I'm in a pink and purple mood, so I'm going to do those 2. So it needs 8s for these. Okay, so it just does 1 damage to the crab right there. So actually that proved to be a decent move for the crab. And that's it. It just takes 2 damage. Or I'm sorry, it just takes the 1 damage, and that's it. So now that we're done, we're going to cover this up, put that on top. And then you have a very important step you need to take. You're going to take your captain card. You're going to, obviously, at this point, you're going to do the other normal things that you would do. If anybody's overheating or there are any critical effects, you're going to go ahead and handle all those. So if you need to put any dice on things or just take care of business, you do that. You're going to flip this over for the automa, and you're going to go through special orders. So it's going to tell you if you have any emplacements, artillery, or BSP cards. It will tell you what the orders are for those. Only spend battlefield support cards if they will hit the target structure. So we're not playing with any of that right now, but let's just say we had an artillery or a BSP card that could do 3 damage. I can't remember, did the LRM carrier? Yeah, the LRM carrier obviously went into structure. So yes, so the LRM carrier would be a candidate for any of these to be attacked. And that actually is talking about battlefield support. If you had emplacements, of course, they can fire every time. You know, but if you had BSP cards, they would be a candidate because the LRM carrier could take structure damage. So that would be an option. Let's just assume we don't have any of this, which we actually don't in this game. So we're going to skip all of these for now, but you would follow very similar rules as you do for the other units. You know, look for an emplacement. If there was a turret, you know, up here or here or here or wherever, if there's a target within 24 inches, prioritize that. If you have to go out further, do that. Look for most structure. Look for lowest TMM, look for most medium damage. You do the same for the other 2. You just have a priority list. Then at the bottom, you're going to go through strategy decisions. So we're going to say if this automated force's objective is complete, it's not, it's trying to destroy all the units. If there's an enemy in one of your units' rear, nope, we don't have that problem. If you lost the most point value worth of units, we didn't lose any as the automa. And if you lost the most, or I'm sorry, yeah, that's right. If you lost the fewest, but nobody lost any, so we're just going to go ahead and hang on to this card. But if any of these were true, we'd go through the Star Captain deck, which I have here, and we'd pull out the other card. So like, for example, if you completed your objective, you're going to take E, and E is going to tell them, okay, for the rest of the game, or the rest of the sortie, all your units are in force withdrawal. So they all would follow force withdrawal rules, and they just try to get off the board before the player tries to destroy them. So there you go. So that's a very basic 1-turn example of how you play Aces using the Battlefield Aces box. I hope this was helpful. I mean, I know this was like a super duper simple example. There's nothing, and the target's rare, like nobody's surrounded or anything. But I just wanted to show what it's like just to evaluate these cards. Obviously, as things get hectic and all the units come together, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be harder to evaluate exactly where to go. In some cases, it might actually be easier because it's going to be more obvious where you go. I think here it's tough because it's like you have 3 units here and 3 units here, and there's just, it doesn't really matter where you move. It's the same result almost no matter what. Especially like for this Timberwolf, it's kind of, you know, there's a lot of places it could go. But maybe when the targets were more all over the place on the map, it's going to be a little bit easier to evaluate that. I don't know. Time will tell. But anyway, I just wanted to show just an example of how you work through it. Maybe I'll make another more complicated example, but I think there's plenty in the book for you to check that out if you're interested. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope it helped. And yeah, enjoy. If you get aces, enjoy. Have fun.